everybody. Welcome to another episode of Eyes on Geopolitics. I'm here with Mick Mulroy, Jason Lyons, and I'm Dimitri Kontakos. A lot happening as usual. The big stuff that popped off was Israel bombed Syria last week, hit the Ministry of Defense, hit the presidential palace, or in and around the presidential palace. Since then, Syria and Israel have come to a ceasefire that's been supported by Turkey, Jordan, and the U.S., obviously. A lot happening there. That was like a quick 1 second thing, but, obviously to go from bombing a country to ceasefire within 3 or 4 days is pretty dramatic. So, Mick, what are you tracking with that?
Well, first of all, it's a good thing there's a ceasefire. Right? The last thing the Syrian people need is another civil war. They've been through over a decade. They've lost over 300,000 people, displaced millions of people. It's a good thing that Turkey, Jordan, the U.S. Did broker the ceasefire. Just to catch people up, there's a group, a minority religious group called the Druze. They are in Syria, predominantly in Suwaida province, which is in the southern part of Syria. There's about 700,000 of them. They're also in Lebanon. I think there's like 300,000 in Lebanon. And there's around 150,000 Druze in Israel. And many of them are in the IDF in senior positions. They are, and I am not no expert on Druze, and obviously I did know about them, quite frankly, before this incident, but basically they split from Shia Islam a long time ago, like 1017 or something like that. They're very distinct. They have their own religion, and it's not open to conversion, and it hasn't been for a long, long time. It's very secretive, but it has like a mixture of a form of Islam, and it really does have a component of Greek philosophy, which obviously, as somebody who follows Stoicism is kind of interesting to me. But they're very distinct, and I bring this up because there are groups that consider them heretics, Muslim groups, particularly the group that supports or did support, now is ostensibly part of the Syrian military, Islamic jihadists, right? HTS, former Al-Qaeda in Syria, al-Nusra Front, and the like. So there is a natural conflict there, unfortunately. The Druze do not support the government in Damascus, so the transitional government led by the interim president, Ahmed al-Shara. So that's one component. And they were fighting with, although they are Arabs, they were fighting with Bedouin Arabs in the southern part, partly because of territory, partly, I think, some would say because they compete for economic trade, even illicit drugs trade. I'm not saying they do or they don't, but that's one of the accusations against at least a part of them. But they don't want the government forces of Ahmed al-Shara, who they consider hostile to them, in Shuwaida. Okay. After this started and people started dying, we saw a lot of the stuff posted. The government sent forces in there, they said, to quell the violence. There's apparently a misconception by the part of the al-Shara government that wouldn't be a red line for Israel. Obviously, that was a misconception. I think it's kind of hard for me to believe they didn't know that, since Israel has made it very clear that they also don't trust al-Shara's government, who they still refer to as Jalani, his name de guerre as a member of the Nusra Front and formerly a member of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And they don't want him on their border. That's why they struck all they could of the Syrian military capacity right when Assad fled and Shara took over. That said, I would point out that Israel, if you were just protecting the Druze, there wouldn't really be a reason to strike and destroy, the Ministry of Defense in Damascus or strike around the presidential palace. So from Israel's perspective, yes, they have a historical connection to the Druze. They have a lot of Druze with influence in Israel, but there's also a much broader strategic issue here with Israel not wanting any government forces near their border. So that's at least my summary of what's happening. This is very precarious. If this were to kick off again, if Israel and the government in Damascus were to go head to head, one, it wouldn't be much of a fight. But this could kick off other conflicts. We obviously have the Kurds who have an agreement with the government, but that's not going that well. We could see essentially a breakdown. The international community is doing what they can. I think we have cut sanctions. Europe also. We're looking at investments in the infrastructure development, humanitarian assistance that would support this government that we need to stay until it has an opportunity for a full vote. It's supposed to be 5 years, so the Syrian people can choose who they want to represent them. Because even with the reformation talks of Shara, he is not an elected leader. There will be parliamentary elections in August, so we're starting to take a step toward that. But I think it's important that people know that this is still a very tenuous situation, and it's not only in the interest, obviously, of the Syrian people, but the region, not to have yet another complete breakdown of Syria, which destabilizes the region and could send another wave of, refugees into Europe, which is obviously not something the Europeans want to see. Kind of a long-winded summary, but...
No, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it was a good one. Yeah. I'll be honest with you, I completely forgot that the Druze, other than in the IDF, were a major part of Israeli culture, except for when I did started hearing about this incident. It reminded me of back when I was a teenager. And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a big incident in Lebanon involving the Druze, a massacre at a refugee camp or something like that?
Yeah.
That was the first time I remember hearing about them.
Right. So they're definitely a persecuted minority group. I don't want to act like I'm some other religious scholar here, but they have a different interpretations of the Prophet Muhammad's status. I don't believe they think he was a prophet, but it's very difficult to learn about their religion because they're pretty closed. But I bring that up again because there is a conflict between those who would view them as non-believers, and then obviously the extremist elements of that would try to take violence against them for it. So they've been protecting themselves for a long time. They've existed. They fled from Egypt into the mountains of Syria predominantly. And they're still there. And I think Israel views them somewhat as a natural ally, and also because they do have influence in Israel. I mean, I know several very senior IDF officers who are Druze, right? So they have, and Israel doesn't want to see 150,000 Druze go into southern Syria to defend themselves, which they will, and they started doing.
I was going to say, I heard they started.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's right there, right? So it's not that far. And then you've got Israelis in there, and it's the best thing is, I think, not that they're asking me, is the government Damascus focus on international development, getting food to the people, and moving toward a government that represents the people. And what I mean by represents, they actually chose. Right, and if they're good and they do all these things right, then maybe they'll be the ones they choose. If they don't, if they focus all their efforts on military activities against the minority groups, well, obviously those minority groups aren't going to vote for you. So that's something I think the U.S. can assist with. We obviously want to see a stable Syria, and it might just need some diplomatic coaching right now.
I have a question about the history of the Druze and in Israel. And correct me if I'm wrong. In 1967, when that went down and Syria took the Golan Heights, isn't that when the majority of the Druze population was joined in Israel when they annexed the Golan Heights?
Yeah, I think they're predominantly from the Golan Heights. I don't want to go past my level of expertise on the Druze. I read a lot about them, you might guess, because I talked about it on ABC quite a bit this week. But I do know several. But I don't want to. I do believe they're predominantly in the Golan Heights. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there was some, there's talk of, not talk, it's happening. Israel's moving to 2 divisions up towards there. And they're looking like they are going to go into, what's the area called? Swahida? I don't want to.
Sweda, yeah.
Sweda.
It's a province, the southern province of Syria. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, bro, I'm the cynical guy, right? I'm going to be honest. It's a land grab. I'm going to say what I think. It's the land grab by Israel. And they could, because I had Jack Murphy on it the other day, and he made a good point. It's like, how can you pick and choose what minority groups you give a shit about?
Well, we do.
Just
throwing it out there.
I don't agree with that either. Yeah, that's fucked too.
I think it's a fair point. You could, and Israel has basically made it a no-go for the government, the transitional government, right? So in a way you could say that it's a land grab in the sense that they just won't accept them down on their border. But it's more than just protecting a minority. It's also the strategic interests of Israel.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody thinks that's not true. Another factor that's complicated this is there's no one voice for the Druze in Soweto, right? So you get like 3 leaders to say, okay, yeah, ceasefire. And then you got this guy, Hikmat, that is head of the the Soweto Military Council. Another factor, if to put in a little bit of the perspective of the government in Damascus, is they think a lot of the Assad regime fled and is in Soweto, right? They couldn't get out of the country. And they believe that this Soweto Military Council has many of the members are former regime members who they obviously strongly oppose. And then the government of Damascus would also point out that they believe that a lot of the illicit drug trade happens down there. But they, of course, want to, on the flip side of that, they want to control all of Syria. But let's go back to the legitimacy issue, right? So there needs to be a stable government in Damascus. They're it. I think that's why the U.S. government is supporting them. I'm not opposed to that. But let's also point out that they didn't get elected to be in Damascus. They just took over by force, right? So the Jeffersonian democracy speak about them is a little overstated, I would say, to be fair on all sides. We have to see what they do. They're saying a lot of the right thing, but there's also a lot of jihadists that are in that government, and that is, I think, a legitimate concern of Israel. Does it necessitate taking strikes inside Damascus? Probably not. But I mean, let's be fair to all sides and let the listeners make their opinion.
Andy Milburn, Colonel,
hey.
How are you, sir?
What's up, Professor?
Good to see you guys again.
Well, now I can't see him because I got the wrong layout.
Oh shit!
I didn't even know you were there.
Yeah, Andy just joined us.
Okay.
Of course, Andy Milburn. What are you tracking with the whole Syria, Israel? Now with the ceasefire.
Well, I came in on the tail end of Mick's talk there, but knowing Mick, I will say right up front that everything he said was right, and I agree with him 100%. And I don't want to add anything, but and appear to be redundant. No, I will say a couple of things perhaps that are not just for the sake of being controversial. Mick, I agreed that Al-Jilani's. The Al-Jilani sponsored government or brokered government or initiated government there in Damascus is not a democratic government. But, I sometimes wonder if we aren't too wedded to the concept of democracy. It hasn't worked well for us and hasn't worked well generally in the Middle East, a leap to so-called democracy. Think about, okay, I know I'm on thin ice here. But I think we have to expect that there is going to be I think we have to expect that there's going to be an interim period government that doesn't look democratic, and I think that may not be a bad thing. I mean, think about our own experiences in Iraq. The democratic government actually brought around ISIS because it was democratic in the sense that it represented a Shia majority, but they they were heavily punitive on the Sunni minority, and it ultimately resulted in bad things. So, in order to have a functioning, I'm pausing here for a moment because I'm wondering about our own model. In order to have a functioning, effective democratic government, you need a broadly educated middle class, and that right now that middle class is no longer existent in Syria. Everyone who could escape has escaped, and so this may be the best that we can hope for.
So I assume you mean like promoting democracies overseas, not our democracy, right, Andy?
Yeah,
We're still
but,
good with, yeah. Okay. No, I get what you're saying, man. It's totally. I do concede that the idea that we can just go around the world making everybody a democracy is just not going to happen. I think we should promote it. I mean, that's what we are. But to your point, not every country is ready for it. All I'm saying is, if you don't want minorities to fight back, claiming you're the legitimate government in Damascus because you took it by force is not a good argument for why another group can't try to take your position by force, right? So there's no moral right there. So all I'm saying is they need to prove that they want to lead the country. Ultimately, that should be the choice of the people, or it's going to stay fractured the entire time. Because if they're going to try to dominate the minorities who is all armed, this is the Middle East, right? And the SDF is, of course, armed by us. They're going to say, okay, well, I guess might makes right, so I'm gonna take you on the battlefield. And I don't think that's in the interest of anybody in Syria. They have a lot. They should focus on developing the country, building up any kind of economy, because you're right. I think 80% of the population is below the poverty limit. And then, humanitarian assistance in that. And then hopefully they prove that they should be running the country. And then, because there is elections coming up. So a forum in August for the parliament. So they're trying to move that way, which I think is good. But that's what I think, what it does in addition to promoting democracy, which has been part of our foreign policy, it also gives people buy-in to the government, right? Long term. They had a vote, win or lose, just like us. It's buy-in to the government. If not, the government says, hey, I'm the government because I took over from the last jackass that tried to tell you what to do by the tip of a gun, then they don't have any buy-in. It's just going to be fractured and,
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And there's so many more things. I mean, so far so good though. I have to say that there's so many things that could have gone cataclysmically wrong in Syria. You think about all the churn going on there. You've got the Alawites who now feel threatened. You've got a population, the majority of whom are extremely angry at the Alawites and associate that sect with Assad and the previous regime and all the horrific things that went on. And yes, there has been retribution. There has been fighting between al-Jilani's mob and the Alawites, but it's not as bad. It hasn't turned into a wholesale massacre the way people thought about. You think about the SDF, the Kurds, and the Turks, the fact that they backed al-Jilani, you'd think also another potential would be out-and-out civil war between the Turkish-backed Arab groups and the Kurds, and that there has been fighting, but it hasn't broken into a whole-scale war yet. So there are.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of really bad things that could have happened that have not yet happened, and there do seem. I will say this, regardless of Jelani's background, there do seem to be some really mature, sensible voices in the administration, in the regime that has taken over now. I mean, at least they're saying the right things. So all of these are positive indications.
Yeah. And we've had, and I've had direct contact with a lot of them, and I think they are, at least the ones I've talked to, mostly about humanitarian stuff, do have the interests of the people throughout Syria in mind. So I'd have to give them that, and I'd have to give the administration, ours, a credit, Secretary Rubio, for moving pretty quick on this and getting this stopped. Like you said, this could have been far worse. could have kept escalating, and it could have turned even worse than it was, way worse than it was. I think we're
sorry, Mick. Let me ask
Yeah,
then,
go ahead, Jay.
us aside and Israel aside, what role do you guys think that Turkey will play in Syria moving forward? Or do they only care about the northwest? Is that it? Or will they get involved wholehearted?
Oh, they're involved wholehearted. They supported the interim president. They supported his efforts throughout, and I think that's the other not danger. Well, yeah, danger. Now, so you get a lot of tension between Turkey and Israel. If I'm not saying that could happen, but if it did happen, it would be dire consequence. If there was actually a conflict between a NATO ally in Turkey, who's obviously a very modern, advanced military, and Israel, who's obviously a very modern and advanced military, that would be like a nightmare scenario. And I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but it's like the worst case scenario. Because they support El-Shara, and Israel do not buy into the reformist idea of what Jelani, and then the U.S. does. So the U.S. does. We've removed the sanctions the sanctions that can be removed by the president. So the executive action sanctions, not the congressionally passed ones. And it looks like we're really moving to normalize relations. So the United States is kind of right there in the middle. But to Andy's point, this could have been far worse. Let's make sure diplomatically it doesn't get far worse.
Yeah, we had Charles Lister on Middle East Institute before.
Yep.
He wrote a couple days ago that Israel's essentially position was, ever since Al-Shara took over, was light regime change, and that's what they were which I don't know what that means. What they were lobbying the U.S. government for. Sorry, Andy, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, the only thing I was going to say is that both Turkey and Israel, they are rational actors in the sense that they are not going to come to blows against one another. They remember they've gone through periods of having bad relations. Remember that the incident, when was that? Back in 2009. Or rather 2010, where the Marmaris broke the blockade in Gaza, and Flotilla 13 intercepted it, and they came to blows there. But in the end, again, everyone talked about then deteriorating situation, possible conflict, but it's just not going to happen between those two. They continue a dialogue. At least their militaries continue a dialogue, especially their respective air forces. They know that would be bad for both countries. They're by no means friends, but they are both. They understand they're rational actors in the same way that Israel and Egypt are. Yes, there is definitely a divergence of interests there, and there's some divergence of interest, frankly, between the United States and Turkey and Syria. We just haven't got, we've seen that in the past when we were backing the SDF, and I think we're likely to see it again going ahead. I mean, we're walking a fine line. I think it was a good decision by the administration to lift the sanctions and give this government a chance, because anything is better than what has been happening to Syria since 2011. But in the end, we've got to bear in mind that the Turks have an agenda in that part of the world that is not always aligned with our own interests.
Yes, very true. And there was an Israeli minister, I don't remember which one, that called for assassination of President El-Shara. So, yeah, that's obviously Charles is super smart on Syria. I go to him to get information for sure. But there's a lot of tension in Israel when it comes to that government. At least from that minister, it's beyond just a soft regime change, right? It's a direct.
Yeah, so we'll see what goes down. Hopefully the ceasefire holds and less people get killed. Moving on to...
I would be remiss if I didn't comment that I love your haircut.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
I
I'm
mean,
trying to look like you.
Oh, high and
That's
tight.
what I'm trying. That's what I'm going for. Yeah.
That's a low bar, D. You,
It's like a popular
Love it.
haircut now. Man.
Yeah.
Like I was walking around town. I mean, this. By the way, this week my town goes from like 9,000 to like 49,000 because we have a massive concert. It's like 3 days of country music. It's awesome. You hear it from my house, but you're seeing a lot of new people in town, obviously, and there's a lot of the Marine haircuts. I don't know, it's a style now or what?
Yeah. Well, it's more of a fade rather than like a high and tight, but
Yeah,
it's the style. Yeah.
D's even got like the Lance Corporal mustache where you're trying to get away
Just outside of
trying to
regs.
get just inside of regs. You know?
Just here.
That's my first sergeant used to say, hey, if you're ever looking in the mirror and going, damn, that's a fine looking mustache, then it's out of
Shave
regs.
it. Yeah.
So that's why they have like these weird ass like super
Yeah.
tight.
Yeah,
Mhm.
can't go past your
Yeah.
like.
Mhm.
Of course. I mean, it makes sense.
Caterpillar
I
right
guess.
the lip. No, anyway, don't diminish from my compliment.
No, please keep complimenting me. This could be a show entirely
looking
about
good.
complimenting me. I'll
I'm sure you're
completely
turning
take it.
heads there in Brooklyn.
Yeah, of course. It's like a daily occurrence for me. All right. New battle damage assessment just dropped. Well, like it's an album on Iran and what went down there. They said that Fort Al was completely destroyed or taken back a good amount of time, but Isfahan and what was the other one? Was it Natanz?
Yep.
Yeah, that they were, it was basically not super. It wasn't destroyed.
Wasn't obliterated?
No, it wasn't obliterated.
Obliterated.
The other thing was CENTCOM did propose a larger campaign that may have taken weeks. That President Trump said no to. He decided to do the one night only thing. I don't think, is that really shocking that CENTCOM has a plan about like a multi-day air campaign over Iran? Like we've been planning this for 25 years.
Yes. You always have three courses of actions. Andy and Jay will tell you, right? You have the one that's like really high, and then you got the one you want that's in the middle, and then the one you definitely don't want is at the bottom, right? So, I'm sure CENTCOM said we could do this operation for a month, knowing that, the president is likely going to say no, and then he's going to go with the second one, right? It's like the Goldilocks effect. We knew this was going to happen, right? BDAs get better with time. We get more people talking on phones that wouldn't. We get human assets to get access that didn't have it immediately after. Obviously, it makes sense. Fort Al is where we dropped. I think that was the one we dropped 12, GBU 57s, right? So who's designed to destroy subterranean? The other ones, Israel hit a lot of surface strikes. I think there was 2 at, was it Natanz? So I think we can expect that. So it's lining up. The only thing I would say is we still control the air over Iran. So this doesn't, if we have the intelligence that says they are either rebuilding that, I think Israel will go ahead and strike, or what we don't know is the stuff that's most concerning. It looks like a lot of the highly enriched uranium did survive. They could probably move to a black site, in other words, one we don't know about, and start heading toward it at a time when the IAEA cooperation is now over. So this is not over. That's is my point. And I don't think we should view it as, okay, we struck them and now we're not going to talk about Iran nuclear ambitions. Iran probably has a nuclear ambition now, maybe that they didn't have before, the war with Israel and the strikes. Right? They said over and over again that if we ever strike their facilities, they're definitely going to try to get a nuclear weapon. So I think we should listen to them and just expect that this might require, mowing the grass, as we used to say. We might have to do this over and over again. Not a good thing, but until Iran comes back to the negotiation table, we get an agreement, and they allow the IAEA back in, I think we can expect this.
Boys, Andy, Jay?
Yeah, I agree again with everything Mick said. One day I'm going to have to find things to argue about with him, but I will say this. I know, and I'm not just saying this again for the purpose of being contrary. I think that we just have to accept sooner or later Iran's going to get a nuclear weapon. It is what it is, and it's not an existential threat to the United States. It's not necessarily in our interests. It's certainly not in our interests. Sooner or later, it's going to happen. More concerning for us is the prospect of Iran continuing its malign actions in the Middle East and being a disruptive influence, and that really is in contravention of our interests. So I guess where I'm heading on this is, again, this is putting me, I know, way out in left field, but understanding that sooner or later Iran's probably going to develop a nuclear weapon. With that in mind, I think we drive a hard bargain as far as supporting proxies, and focus on that side of the equation, and not get sucked into too much to Israel's argument about, this is an existential threat to Israel, blah, 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 blah. Is it an existential threat to Israel? Israel's got nuclear weapons. Remember the Cold War? I mean, we were both the Soviet Union and the United States were existential threats to each other, but it never came to blows because everyone understood that. Iran, in the end of the day, the Iranian administration, I'm not justifying them. I'm not saying they're good guys, but they're rational actors. And again, I know this flies in the face of conventional wisdom, but I think in the end, we just have to be realists. It's going to happen. It may not be. They're not going to have. I don't think they're going to have a formidable array of nuclear weapons, but certainly I think they'll get one. But that's not. For me, that wouldn't be my biggest concern. My biggest concern would be that they would continue to do what they've been doing since the 1980s, which is just fuel the whole region with massive instability, supporting bad things. And that is what we should be going after. That is what is in opposition to U.S. interests. Our interests don't mirror those of Israel. And yes, the Israelis have, since time immemorial, the last few decades, been banging the drum on, hey, this is an existential threat to us. I would even argue that it's not. It's not even an existential threat to Israel, for the reasons that I have stated. And I think we need to bear all of that in mind.
Do you have anything, Jay?
Can't follow up with either of those. They're both great points.
I mean, by all means, go ahead and mow the grass. Yes, but at the same time, we need to be talking to Iran, and we need to be saying behind the curtain, we need to be telling them, hey, whatever happens on this side, okay, we're against proliferation and all that shit. But if you start supporting groups like the Houthis, continue supporting groups like the Houthis or Hamas or Hezbollah, again, that's really going to get our goat. And that is what's going to piss us off. Or if you start fueling if you start opposing the Syrian regime again and fueling the opposition there, that's going to really piss us off. That's when we're going to come down hard on you. Those are the things that we should be concerned about most.
And on that point, the Yemeni government just seized 700 tons, I think was the biggest one yet, of very advanced weapons going from Iran into Yemen, right? So they hadn't stopped, right? Even with all this going on, they haven't stopped. And we just saw last week 2 commercial ships. I actually knew some of the security guys that were on them, that were sunk. Sunk, people killed, civilians killed. And I'm sure a lot of those weapon systems came directly from Iran. They use this proxy force as some kind of way to skirt responsibility. And to Andy's point, maybe we should just start holding them directly responsible for everything that they, especially when they're launching, advanced cruise missiles that they obviously didn't make up in Houthi land at particularly commercial vessels. Everybody.
We've kind of been giving them a buy on this. We make a big thing of the nuclear weapons, but think way back in Iraq when U.S. soldiers were being killed by weapons supplied by Iran. We've talked about it. We said we brought pressure on them, but we haven't really held that face to the grindstone, to mix my metaphors, right? We haven't really made this a red line, and I think it's time to do that.
So let me ask then, if they do get a nuclear weapon, do you think that would cause them to now bump up what they're doing already? Because it's kind of like, what are you going to do? We have a nuclear weapon now. So now we're really going to supply the Houthis. Now we're really going to start shit in Syria. Or do you think that I'm going to say, I doubt this, is probably a rhetorical question. Or do you think once they get it, they'll be like, okay, we're happy now, and just back up?
It's a great point. But I think, we call that bluff. I mean, the United States has a vast nuclear array. Of course, Israel has a nuclear array. We speculate that's bound to be far greater than Iran is able to build in the next 50 years. So again, we're dealing with the rational actor. Iran can hold the prospect of nuclear weapons all at once, but in the end, we know they're not going to use them. And we can bring pressure to bear as though they are not a nuclear nation. I don't think it changes their calculus, is what I'm saying, in the way that North Korea, being a nuclear country, changes the calculus. With North Korea, you've got a truly, you've got a guy who is totally irrational and doesn't give a shit how many of his population are killed, and at the end, it's not the same model as the Soviet Union or even Iran, and we have to recognize that. That if we could go back in time, that's one thing that we certainly would do. Pakistan is a nuclear nation, and we've seen some nut jobs in charge of Pakistan. But at the end of the day, vis-a-vis the United States, we're relatively comfortable with Pakistan. It's not going to do anything overtly against our interests, but there's always the prospect that Pakistan's going to use nuclear weapons against India. We're walking a fine line across the globe on this topic, but I'm just saying from our perspective, from the perspective of U.S. interests, what has really hurt us and will continue to hurt us is Iranian malign action in the Middle East. That is what we really should be focusing on.
Would be interesting to see what the intelligence community said about if there was a kickoff of a nuclear weapons arms race, right? So would that stabilize or destabilize the region? Would everybody, it's kind of like walking into a bar where everybody's armed. People tend to be polite. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And you can do that actually in Montana. But that's a good question. I don't even know what the intelligence community's assessment of that would be. Would it, because there's a concept during the Cold War, the mutually assured destruction, right? So MAD, that it kept it a Cold War because it was in no country's interest, the U.S. or the Soviet Union, to have a hot war when we were both armed to the teeth with thousands of deliverable nuclear weapons. I don't know. That'd be interesting to see if we could get somebody on the show that has worked in that area of analysis.
And it'd be interesting to see if somebody would actually say that would be the case. Because I feel like if there is an actual intelligence assessment like that, maybe 20 years ago or whatever, it would ever be released. Because, there are people that don't want Iran to have a bomb. They don't want the Saudis to have a bomb, because a Shia bomb's going to, start a Sunni bomb. Yeah.
The other issue is that the nuclear confrontations are not regional, right? If you see you can look at this on YouTube. If there was a regional limited exchange of nuclear weapons in India, Pakistan, I mean, it dramatically affects the entire world ecosystem, like severely. Not like, oh, it's a little dark today. No, we're talking like crop production goes down 15, 20%. It's a real global consequence.
And I would say we're far greater risk of that happening. Indeed, it's come close to happening back in the late 90s than we are of Iran and Israel really squaring off and using nuclear weapons. I guess what I'm saying, first strike or not on either side. I think both countries in the end are rational enough not to do that. But I'm not now for the audience. I'm not saying that Pakistan and India are not rational actors, but I'm saying the level of hatred between those two countries takes them to the point where perhaps they cease to be objectively rational. And the last thing I'll say on this is, I remember having a Pakistani brigadier. He was a very charming guy, and brought up in the British tradition. That's probably why he was charming. Played cricket, was drank tea, and all of these things. And yet, when we started talking about India, and we started talking about what was the incident in the late 90s? Was it Kargil? Am I pronouncing it right?
Sounds right.
And he talked about the fact that Pakistan has a policy of first strike. All right, of first strike preemptively. Okay, if they think India is going to drop the bomb, their policy is we're going to do it first. All right, and he was quite open about this. That is scary. I mean, that really is scary, because as Mick says, that's not going to just affect Pakistan and India. That is a constant threat that I think, because it's been around for so long, we kind of underplay.
Yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to say is. What I'm trying to say again is Israel having a nuclear bomb. Iran having a nuclear bomb, while certainly not something that we want, is perhaps not as a disastrous event as we may, or the Israelis portray it.
I think the best course of action, if we could sweeten the pot, if you will, is to get them back in a nuclear agreement.
100%.
And if they could develop an economy, because they have super intelligent people, advanced society, very innovative. If we could, and you brought this up earlier, Andy, if we could get them to have a sizable middle class, right? That's what stabilizes countries. Every country has really poor and really rich people. No matter where you go, it's the middle class that stabilizes.
Educated.
And education and, a sound economic base where people are, comfortable that they can secure livelihood for their families. That's where they need to go. And I don't think they're going to get there unless they're let back into the global economy. And that's only going to come with a nuclear agreement, a new, the issue is, does the regime care about the regime only, or do they care at all about the people of Iran?
But Mick, let me ask, and Andy and Jay, like, let's say they do come together and come back with a new agreement, and it's JCPOA 2.0 with some like added things or whatever, right?
Yeah.
What's to stop Israel from undermining that agreement like they did from 2015 onwards?
I don't think there's anything. I mean,
so that's what I'm saying. Like, we could do all this work, this diplomatic work, people grinding for years or decades at a time, and just for Israel to be like, you know what, we're going to fucking bomb them again because we feel threatened.
I mean,
even though I would argue this is going to accelerate their nuclear program rather than them, even Netanyahu saying they're a year away in his speech right after he bombed them.
I mean, I think the U.S. would have put a lot of pressure, obviously, and we do give them a sizable portion of their defense budget is coming from the U.S. taxpayer. I would like to hear their argument. I don't disagree with your point, D, but I like to hear their argument. And we say, well, we just got an agreement. President Trump has said no enrichment in Iran. And if we feel that we can validate it, and they're not enriching at all, so they're part of this multinational consortium of, they get, enriched uranium from outside the country to use for their nuclear program. And let's face it, energy is not an issue for Iran. So the need for a nuclear program is not as high as other places. But if we get to that and Israel still tries to, I would have to hear their argument. I do think the U.S. would put significant pressure if they got Iran to concede to the no enrichment, which is beyond what the 2015 JCPOA had. At that time, it was like 3.67 or something. It was enough for energy, but obviously not anywhere close to 90% for enrichment. But it doesn't look like they're talking anymore.
Yeah. I think to me, it's administration dependent. Are they willing? Have they shown a history of actually enforcing what they say as far as, hey, we have something in place, keep your hands off of Iran until, they prove otherwise. But I also think it's Israel dependent as far as telling us ahead of time, hey, in 24 hours, we're going to bomb them because we have intel that they're rebuilding or whatever, or are they just going to do it? And then we have to do, play catch up. So I think maybe those factors are also in play.
Yeah, we seem to be, and have been for a while, in a rather unhealthy position of saying collectively that that any criticism of Israel is un-American. And I think we have to remind ourselves of the fact that our interests do not always align absolutely with Israel. And I will remind everyone, not you guys, because you remember this, right? Do you remember Pollard, the whole Pollard case? All right.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, the spy case. Yep.
Yeah, Mick, you may not remember this, but when Pollard was when he was pardoned or not pardoned or let go, there was considerable opposition to that within the intelligence community, mainly from the agency,
absolutely.
but also the NSA. And I'll tell you why. It wasn't simply because he betrayed his country, but it was the nature of the stuff that he was handing to Israel. He threatened, he was handing sources and methods, not related to Israel, but stuff that we were doing against the Soviets. All right. Why did the Israelis want that stuff? Well, they were negotiating getting certain Jews, high level dissidents out of the Soviet Union at the time. Guys with specific scientific expertise. They were bargaining with the Soviet government at the time to get these guys out. And then suddenly they task one of their agents to start collecting stuff that we are collecting on the Soviets, to include, and I can't mention the program here, but a very highly classified program was a method of us collecting intelligence in a certain spectrum. I think you guys are tracking what I'm saying, from the Soviets. Pollard gave that to the Israelis, and we have no doubt that was passed on to the Soviets. All right, that is why the agency was so pissed off when Pollard was released from jail. It wasn't simply that he was letting an ally know what we were doing. Because the second part of this, why would the Israelis want to spy on the United States? We let them know everything, right? I mean, our level of intelligence sharing is pretty high level, as you guys know. So the only reason they would want to have a spy within our, within the intelligence community would be to collect on areas that we wouldn't normally pass to them. Again, kind of a counter-Soviet operations. And I bring that up simply as, I'm not derogating the Israelis. I'm just pointing out there is a classic case of the fact, a reminder to all of us that our interests do not neatly overline. The Israelis will always, when it comes to a choice like that, they're not going to be affected by emotion. They're going to be affected by their own interests, even if it means jeopardizing U.S. sources and interests. And that's just the nature of the world. We need to understand that before we get all weak-kneed and start thinking that Israel and the United States are the same entity.
Yeah, and there's nothing un-American about, I would second Andy's point about criticizing the policies of Israel. There's nothing un-American about criticizing the policies of America, right? I mean, that's very American. And there's plenty, and I know I have a lot of Israeli friends that also do criticize and disagree with the policies of the current administration. So hopefully that's just a very weak way to debate policy issues. Is just simply claim you're not patriotic because you disagree with a policy issue.
But or even anti-Semitic too. There are people that,
yeah,
which is kind of wild because, like, you even saw, the former PM of Israel.
Yeah,
call what's happening in Gaza.
Half of the IDF. If people are familiar with the IDF, they tend to be middle of the road. At least they were, and plenty of them disagree. It doesn't make them right or wrong, but it certainly doesn't make them anti-Semitic. A Jewish Israeli IDF soldier.
All right, Andy's gone. I love Andy. We'll miss Andy desperately.
What happened?
I don't know. He said he had to run.
He said in the chat he had to run.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Interesting take. I mean, we had Bill Evanina on the Team House the other day. Just came out. He's the former director of counterintelligence for the DNI. And I slipped in a question at the end where I was like, hey, I know obviously we have like, Iran, Russia, China that are like actively trying to penetrate, U.S. spy agencies and spy on us in general. I'm like, out of our allies, which is like the worst acting? And I asked that because I knew the answer, right? And he said it was Israel. I mean, he had a pretty diplomatic answer though, like saying, like we're really close allies, blah, blah, blah. We look at this as friendly fire. I'm like, okay. I mean, I wasn't the host there, so, finally Jack let me speak on the team house. But it's interesting, right? Like an ally that we do a lot for. I mean, we do a lot for.
Oh, yeah.
Is still actively, and forget just the Pollard thing, right? During like that era, but also right now, what's happening. I mean, they do it now.
Yeah. I mean, we got to be smart. We got to be realistic. I mean, I support Israel, the country for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of our allies collect on us.
Sure.
And we collect a lot on our allies too. Right. So I guess when you're in the spy game, you're more pragmatic, I guess I would say. Right. Because it's hard to be, flipping out when somebody's spying on us and we're spying on them. So it's something that happens. And
yeah. Last bit. There's a lot going on. Barak Ravid, the reporter from Axios, said that the Mossad chief David Barnea visited the White House this week to discuss Israel's plans to transfer the population of Gaza and requested the assistance of us, the Americans, in encouraging other countries to absorb hundreds of thousands of people from Gaza. That's crazy. I'm just saying it like that. I know that's not crazy analysis, but that's a fact. It's insane to displace hundreds of thousands of people from Gaza to other countries. It doesn't matter where. Some would say that would constitute a war crime, myself included. How the fuck do we fix Gaza, Mick? Go ahead, tell us right now.
Wow, we're going to have to start over with the hour. And I probably still won't come up with a solution. I would say if you forcibly displace people from their country, that's against international law.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not an international lawyer, but I'm pretty confident in that. And I don't know how you practically do that from a military perspective. I'm sure the IDF's head's blowing up. Like we're going to forcibly move 2.2 million people. Remember, Hamas was at the beginning only 30,000 people. Terrorists. So now they're probably down around 10 so we're talking 10,000 are terrorists, and we're going to forcibly move 2.2 million people against their will to countries that don't have the capacity to host some of them, at least the countries I saw listed, to take care of their own people. Right. So how are you going to support them there?
Yeah.
Right. So the legality is obviously an issue, but also just the practicality is also an issue. Like I don't even know how one would do that. And I don't know what you would do with people once you got there. Is the international community going to fund in perpetuity the housing, food, expense that, these countries, a lot of them are in Africa, would need to support their people, the Palestinians? And then what kind of destabilizing issues would that cause for those countries? I mean, you just keep going and going, and it's not good. I think the best way to focus is how do we end the conflict? How do we ensure the security concerns of Israel, which obviously are real? How do we reconstruct Gaza so that the Palestinians can live in peace and develop and have their own future for their families? And then how do we eventually get back on track for a two-state solution, which we seem to be very far away from now, much further than we have been in the past. So that is where I think the effort should be. I can't even imagine how the forcible relocation of people out of Gaza would even.
Yeah, I think every country on that list right off the bat should say absolutely not. No. The answer is no. So, whatever else we can do to try to help, we'll do. But no, because if you even entertain talks in that, you're opening up you're going down a slippery slope with that. So I would say hell no. And the U.S. should be first and foremost to say no. Not that I'm saying they're coming here, but I'm saying Israel, take that shit off the board. It's not even it's a non-starter.
Right. And the first step, and I think the U.S. is obviously pushing for this. We saw an announcement, I think, was it last night, that there was the hostages? But we should all be rooting for the U.S. and their effort, our effort, to get to a ceasefire, the 60-day ceasefire. That is, the hostages need to come out. Massive amounts of humanitarian and assistance need to go in. It's a dire situation on both fronts. So we should be rooting for that. But this idea that they're going to forcibly relocate millions of people.
Bad shit, you could say it. Yeah.
It's just a non-starter. I think and if we had anything to do with it, that would be forever part of our
It'd be a black mark on us. Yep. Exactly.
All right, last bit of news. USAID officially shut down. We just burned 500 tons of emergency food stores that weren't even in America, I don't think, right? They were already overseas, and we destroyed that stuff. 500 tons of food. That's probably already been paid for, right? It's not like we're going to bounce on the check, right? So
yes.
Kind of unbelievable that this is how these things work. Mick, you're in the humanitarian space. You tell me, you could have used probably 500 tons of food for what you do, your endeavors.
Yes, and I think, this is just shouldn't happen. Let me just put it that way. To your point, D, it is overseas because we pre-position these stores. A lot of them were these emergency biscuits that a kid can eat 2 of them a day and survive. And it has all the nutrition and vitamins and all that and minerals and stuff. Already paid for. I don't know, but it seems to me like the government should have offered the World Food Program, because it costs money to actually destroy it, right? So if we said, hey, World Food Program, come take all this stuff, give it out, right? Or any of the big NGOs that have the capacity and potentially the money to move it or pay for the least place that we don't want to pay for anymore. It just seems like it's a total waste. There's a report out in the Washington Post that came out July 1st, which is the day the USAID officially shut down, that they predict 14 million people will starve to death by 2030 because of the cuts, both in foreign aid, not just the United States, but also what USAID used to do. Now, I get some of the criticism, they're paying for stuff that they shouldn't have, but the core mission to contribute to the plight of humanitarian crises as a country, we've always been very good at that, and we should be proud of it. Why? That needs to continue. And then to develop countries so they don't become a perpetual state of need, so that they can eventually join the world economy and maybe even trade with the United States, right? We're a capitalist society. We should want that. I think that core mission should never have been cut down. And you could talk about PEPFAR. President Bush came out with President Obama on the concern with that. In that, it's not only horrible for the people in those countries, but that could spread, these international epidemics around the world, right? It's not just, and there's nothing wrong with helping people just for the sake of helping people, right? But it's also in our own interest. You could have mass migration. You could have, the spread of disease that wouldn't be spread if we contained it at its point of origin. So I think this needs to be returned on. Fine, it's in the State Department now. A lot of people on both sides of the aisle used to argue that USAID should fall under the State Department anyway. But it needs to be turned back on. The U.S. should play a prominent role in I think humanitarian assistance and disaster relief around the world. And right now we're not doing it.
Yeah, very well said. I feel like I don't know how anyone could really disagree about this. Because all right, USAID was probably doing some bullshit and wasting money like most probably government programs do. But for the most part, they did a good job. And frankly, their budget was a fucking rounding error in our federal budget, right? It wasn't like we were spending. I love you guys and I love the military and I love what it stands for, but like they should get their shit together too in terms of like an audit and seeing where our money fucking goes there. It's $1 trillion thing. Besides the Marines, right? The Marines passed their audits. Yeah.
They did. And I think most military members would agree with you, dude, just so you know.
Yeah. Sure.
They can see that a lot of this stuff isn't getting spent correctly. It's not a slight on the military.
It's interesting, man. I think there's a lot of stuff that most people will agree on if just, you know, because
just get out of their own way.
Yeah, it's kind of human nature. Like, all right, we see starving kids somewhere, like we want to help them. We think there's waste, fraud, and abuse somewhere. We should actually look at it and pinpoint it and take the time to figure it out and fix it instead of just chopping it. Like it's just we're worried about our next earnings call like it's a publicly traded company. It's not how government works.
Yeah. And I just read something yesterday, and I'm paraphrasing here. Speaking of waste, something basically this expert said from the moment that these funds were frozen, and that includes like this food that was spoiled, from the time that aid stopped, the vendor, as far as the vendors and the contractors go that distribute it and all that other stuff, the interest that is accruing on all of that stuff is starting to surpass what is the supposed savings in ending the program. So it would have been cheaper to, like you said, Mick, give it to another organization and say, pass this out, or, you know, restart part of the program. You know, it'd be worth the money, but we're wasting money trying to save money.
Yep. And a lot of this would have gone to children, right? I think everybody that's an adult should care about that. It should be your, you know. So, yeah, super.
I mean, even if you don't like kids, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's feed some starving kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, this isn't
we're part of a
should not
society,
be a political thing.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. When I was in Somalia, people would, you know, joke, and you see it in the movie Black Hawk Down. You know, they call the Somalis skinnies, you know, and obviously that's a horrible thing. They're they were dying and they are dying, but I still saw those same Marines while we were out feeding starving children, giving them food or a little bit of water and stuff like that. So anybody with a heart, you know, and a soul should be all on board with getting this food to where it needs to go, and not just food, all the aid.
Yeah.
Totally
Great way to end
agree,
it, boys. I want you guys to do us all a favor. Check out Mick Mulroy's links. Check out Andy's links. Check out Jason's links. We have a new newsletter for the Team House and Eyes On. It aggregates everything. That link is in the description as well. And the best way to support the show is patreon.com/the Team House. You get both Eyes On and the Team House ad-free and early. Get early access. And as usual, guys, this was great.
Awesome. Thanks, gents.
Thanks, gents. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Take care.
You too.
Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of The Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page. And there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.